Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this very important debate today. Grateful to my right honourable friend for bringing it forward, and I hope I can do so with some experience as the leader of a local authority and also having sat on that Education Select Committee SEND inquiry in 2019. I want to describe the problem from a local authority perspective for colleagues in the House. The 2014 legislation, as we've heard, was well intentioned, but it hasn't delivered on those intentions, and in some ways has created an impossible circumstance where very high levels of demand and expectation on a service now exist that have huge budget and capacity pressures, and that's not sustainable. And local authorities are in many ways caught between a rock and a hard place in that they're expected to meet the demand of families but also have to balance the budget, and all the time with the knowledge that any steps taken to reduce costs may well end up being overturned in tribunal. And inadvertently and understandably seeking to give parents of SEND children some authority and control over what support they get, it's created an adversarial system. There's a funding issue to all of this, but fundamentally the system doesn't work, and so funding alone won't fix it. Because it's a partnership across health, schools, local authorities and others, there's a challenge in both meeting expectation and in accountability for the outcomes. But fundamentally, at a policy level, we have a system that says to families that they can have whatever support and services they want, which is a laudable aim. But obviously, when that meets with reality, there are limited budgets and limited capacity in a system to deliver, which means local authorities and delivery partners are constrained in what they can do. And the system hasn't really recognised this contradiction, and so the local partnership is still judged against an unachievable target, which is why in the latest SEND inspections, there is nobody out there nationally who is any better than inconsistent in their SEND outcomes. In Nottinghamshire, we fully recognise the need for improvement in capacity for SEND support, in tackling waiting times for outcomes, and in the scrutiny and accountability of the system, among other things. And we've introduced a new SEND Improvement Board with independent chair Dame Christine Lenihan of the Council for Disabled Children. The intention of that is to drive improvement in this system with proper scrutiny and oversight. We've seen some positive steps already from that. We're fully committed to tackling it to the extent that I've also created a specific cabinet role for SEND support. We're constrained, though, in truth. The inspection regime isn't really sure what it's asking us for. Many authorities have huge deficits in their high needs block, massively overspending, and yet have received more positive inspection outcomes. Whilst we've balanced the budget, we don't have a deficit, which clearly has an impact on services. That doesn't seem to be a factor in inspection outcomes. So are we being asked to balance this budget or not? We have a legal duty to do so, but that isn't recognised by Ofsted. So Nottinghamshire has among the poorest funded children in this space. We're among the poorest funded authorities. We still balance our budget for additional needs. Other authorities who have more money and still overspend massively are rewarded with better inspection outcomes. Fundamentally, the system doesn't have a shared and coherent view of what the system is asking us to deliver, and that is a huge issue. We're also told that government's approach is to increase inclusion within mainstream schools where possible, and that's absolutely right, I think, with appropriate support for children who can to be supported in mainstream settings wherever that's possible, and for us to work with schools and SENCOs to deliver that. NOTS has taken that approach for many years, and in some government circles have been held up as an exemplar of good practice, and in inspections we're marked down for it. Again, different parts of government telling us different things, and it's not always clear what it is we're really being asked to do. We take a graduated approach to step up children up the pyramid depending on need, but the first response is to try and support children to remain in mainstream school, and that's partly because it's very often the best outcome for children, partly because it's a requirement of a system with limited funding that we try those lower cost options first. And from an outcomes perspective, as I say, it's often the right thing to do, because fundamentally, although some children will require lifelong care, for many, ultimately, we want them to go on to live independent lives, to be in employment. We should have high ambitions for our children. It's often not the best thing to become more reliant on more services than you need, because it can make that journey into being an independent adult more difficult. Every child and every circumstance is different, but at each stage from what I'm saying here, you can see where the tension and the conflict arises. The opinion of health professionals and people tasked with achieving the goal of helping children become independent adults often clashes with the totally understandable desire of parents to get the very most and very best support, bespoke support available for their child. Finally, SEND Transport, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is one of the biggest pressures on council budgets at the minute. Our budget has seen a 50% increase over 5 years due to rising demand, inflationary costs of fuel and contracts, wage rises, So again, we're in a place where we're trying now to save money. In some cases, that's also the right thing to do, because the expectation, I think, in some cases outstrips what's reasonable. But inevitably, it will lead us to further conflict, as we have to go back to families and say, I know you've had a one-to-one taxi service to school with a supportive member of staff there with them every day for the last several years, but we actually now need you to share with somebody else, or we actually now need you to take your child to school yourself because you have a mobility vehicle for that purpose. That might be the right thing to do. These might be rational decisions to try and offer the best service within limited budget. Inevitably, it will cause issues, and that is coming down the track. If we end up with decisions like that being overturned in tribunal, then again, back to the question, what is it we are being asked to achieve here within our limited budget? Before I end, I just wanted to raise, on a brighter note, some of the work we're doing in Nottinghamshire, taking this incredibly seriously through our Independent Improvement Board and Cabinet level focus, as I've discussed. We're creating 494 new SEND specialist places, including the Orchard SEND School opened last year and a new one in Mansfield that we're building this year, which I'm very proud of. And we're working with St Co's and our schools to improve the graduated approach and the support that's available. But Madam Deputy Speaker, money's not ultimately the answer here. We have well-meaning legislation that doesn't work. I would ask ministers to consider those two proposals.